Why do wealthy people buy life insurance? I'll give you a quick story about a partner at a venture capitalist firm in New York City. They have some of the biggest clients in the world, like SpaceX and OpenAI. You would know who they were if I mentioned their name. With that said, I met this partner a couple of years ago, and we had a conversation about whole life insurance. Now, he is brilliant when it comes to all things finance. I believe he used to be an investment banker, but then got promoted. He's worked at Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Citadel. Now he's a partner at a VC fund, and people are always trying to recruit him. He's been interviewed on CNBC. One of the sharpest guys I know when it comes to numbers. But when we connected, what he was interested in is looking at whole life insurance really as a part of his portfolio, not for the life insurance, but he was fixated on the cash value. He was looking at the cash value really as a fixed income asset in his portfolio, combined with the tax advantages that it offers. Now, the thing about him is he had an old indexed universal life insurance policy, so he does have some experience with cash value life insurance. And when we looked at that policy, it was not performing well. And then also, every time he would reach out to his agent to try to get answers to questions he had, he'd get a very slow response, which he didn't like because he moves so fast. He wants to answer right now, which I totally get. So a quick story about how we met. He visited our website. I remember this specifically. It was on a Saturday around 7 a.m. and one of our agents called him that morning. And we had 2 phone calls with him in the morning. The first was one of my associates, and then the associate let me know about the call. I called him later that morning, and then what we both did was prepared numbers together. We sent those numbers to him that afternoon, and then we met the next day, Sunday afternoon. It was after my congregation meeting. It was actually week 1 of NFL, and my team, the 49ers, were not playing until the next evening as they had the Monday Night Football game against the Jets, and that was against Aaron Rodgers, the second year he was on the Jets, where he had a better Achilles. But the Niners won, so I was happy, but then that season ended up not being that good. Anyway, back to our friend. So he got it, and then he decided to move forward. Now, to be transparent, we had several more meetings, and he had a lot of additional questions because he wanted to understand the product inside and out. So a little bit on him. When we connected, he was 44 years old. He had about $5 million in fixed income assets. His portfolio is much larger than $5 million, but those are fixed assets. The thing about those fixed assets is they were producing between 4 to 5% per year, but they were taxable. He didn't like that. He lives in New York. He's in the highest tax rate. He also had about $800,000 in cash value in that old IUL policy, but that still had a negative return, and it was just not performing based on the structure, how it was set up, and he wanted to get out of that after we reviewed it. So here's what we did. Step 1, we reviewed different life insurance companies. Now, he picked things up faster than any individual I've ever met. Our biggest client is an institution. It's a bank. Whenever we offer a policy or any type of solution to a bank, the due diligence is about as thorough as it gets. The bank reviews everything. There's an independent third party that comes in and reviews everything. So he did all of that by himself as he conducted the due diligence on different life insurance companies. He preferred the major mutuals, who are Mass Mutual, Guardian, New York Life, and Northwestern Mutual. And he also liked the fact that they all contract in New York State, and he likes the regulations that New York State enforces upon insurance companies and financial institutions. He's got some insight in that world. But with that said, the second thing we did was diversify. So he looked, here's exactly what he did actually. He put $1.2 million in Guardian, and then he also took out a Mass Mutual policy where he moved $800,000, but that was a 1035 exchange of his IUL policy. So What we reviewed as we looked at the numbers were as follows. First, the annual yield. He wanted to see what the cash value would grow by on a year-to-year basis. He quickly glanced at that because that was not his primary concern. This is what he was interested in: the internal rate of return and then the taxable equivalent. So let's take a look at his actual policies. These are a couple years old now, but you can see exactly what he's been doing and how they have been performing. With the Guardian policy, his plan was to move $1.2 million into it. He's moved $900,000 thus far into the policy. So he's 3 years in. By the 4th year, he will have funded $1.2 million. His cash value will be very close to that dollar amount. And by the 5th year, he's at 1.2. Note, he did not pay anything. And as of right now, he's not planning on adding more money. However, we did discuss that because he did ask, hey, if I want to keep adding 300 grand or say a lesser amount, I can keep doing that, correct? The answer is yes. We set it up that way. So he can keep adding money. But that's a high-level overview of his Guardian policy. Here's the net numbers. So we've got the annual yield, which is what his policy is earning net year over year. So not the dividend rate. He knows that's gross. I talk about that all the time. I won't get into those details. But the first thing we did was address the elephant in the room, the negative hit up front. This is a Guardian 10-pay policy, which is why we have a bigger hit up front. We did look at their L95 product, which gives you more cash value up front, but he liked the long-term potential of the 10-pay. So looking at this, we can see the annual yield and then the IRR. Here's what he was attracted to, looking at this long-term. And we'll look at the taxable equivalent in a moment. But first, let's look at MassMutual. And this was a 1035 exchange of just about $800,000. There's your first year cash value. We absolutely juiced the policy. It is a non-MEC. Look at that annual yield, minimal hit up front, and then it just really cranks over time, which is nice. So here we've got the annual yield. This is based on their current dividend rate of 6.6%. And the long-term IRR, yeah, that's really what he was interested in. So what we did to make this simple is looked at the combined values. So we just condensed everything into one illustration. Here we go. So let's take a look at the taxable equivalent yield, shall we? So we've got the combined values. What is highlighted in that light gray color represents the break-even point. So he's cash positive between years 3 and 4. So this is a quick move. I've got money over here in other assets. I want to shift some of it over here. If I want to add more, great, but this is my plan as of right now. There's your combined annual yield and internal rate of return. Quick side note, because this question comes up a lot. The MassMutual illustration looked a lot better than the Guardian illustration if we go back and look at the yields and IRR. The main reason why is because the dividend rate with MassMutual for 2026 is 6.6% and Guardian is 6.25%. So you've got a higher dividend interest rate. What I have observed with Mass, Guardian, and New York Life and Northwestern Mutual is those are your 4 major mutuals. I have seen them go back and forth with each other over the years. I have not been able to make a strong case to say one company has just produced the greatest overall IRR. They all have literature that proves that they are the best, but every time I look at that, it's their best versus another company's average. So when we design policies equally, fairly, look at independent studies on our own, like those 4 major mutuals, you can't go wrong with any of them. And I do see them kind of even out over time as well. So I say that just to mention that while one projection might look better right now, it doesn't mean that that is going to be fact forever. I always see them go back and forth over time. He understood that, but a lot of times that question does come up. Here's our taxable equivalent. Okay, so taxable equivalent yield represents what he would need to earn in another asset, like he had money in a money market, or if he has money in treasuries, another fixed income asset, what he would need to earn in order to net the same result that he's getting in the life insurance policy. So let's just focus on the IRR because the annual yield looks fantastic, but most folks in his space look at that and say, the IRR is what I'm interested in. So he's in a 40% tax rate. It's higher than that when you look at his total tax rate. But 40% IRR, if we just look at his IRR at 60, 4.28%. Okay. The taxable equivalent is 7.13%. So what that means is he would need to earn in that money market or treasuries, guess what? 7.13%. And then after paying taxes at his 40% rate, he'd be left over with a net of 4.28%. So instead of that, why would I not just put it into life insurance? That's typically what we see with folks who have cash on hand and are putting money into these policies for the cash value growth. And then sometimes they'll ask about taking loans and such. In his case, that's not really his play. He's looking at the long-term tax advantages, and the death benefit also has some value in his overall estate plan. But the tax rate is the one thing that can influence someone's decision. For example, we mentioned him being in New York, that effective tax rate is probably higher, which makes it even more attractive when you look at the taxable equivalent. But if someone else looks at this and says, okay, I'm in a similar position, maybe just take a 0 or 2 off, which you can do, but I'm not in a similar position in terms of my tax rate. What if that's 20%? Well, you can adjust the tax rate to 20%, and then we see what the taxable equivalent yield is, which again just means if you are comparing life insurance to something else that you have to pay taxes on, income taxes, that's why I mentioned treasury bills or money markets, right? So capital gains tax is a little bit different, but that you have to pay income tax on, this is what I would need to earn, and then after tax, I'd be left over with what I see on the left. And again, this is the IRR. Anyway, to recap, why do wealthy people buy whole life insurance? It's usually for the cash value. They're looking at it in many cases as a fixed income asset play with very nice tax advantages. The death benefit also plays a role from an estate planning standpoint, but most people we speak with are very, very interested in the cash value. And also, if you design a policy for high cash value, you will have the lowest death benefit up front, but the highest death benefit long term. Because the policy with the most cash value long term also has the most death benefit long term. I always like to mention that. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'd love to hear any thoughts, comments, questions. Please feel free to leave them in the comments below. And as always, I hope this helps. So if this was helpful and you'd like to go deeper, here's what I would do next. Step 1, download the free case study using the link below. It'll make everything we talk about feel more concrete because you'll see actual numbers on paper. And step 2, if you're serious about a high cash value life insurance policy for yourself, whether it's for your business, real estate, or you're just looking at a safe place to save money with tax benefits, I'd use the calendar link on that page to book a custom policy design session. On that call, we'll ask a few simple questions about your situation. We'll go over an illustration with you on the spot, and we'll walk through the year-by-year numbers so you can decide if it makes sense for you. No pressure, just math and options. And if you just want to keep learning for now, feel free to subscribe and check out the other case studies on the channel. As always, I hope this helps.